Is ePacket even a service that you should consider using in 2021? Those who are new to e-commerce and dropshipping probably wouldn't know this answer, and the more experienced of you out there probably will know the answer. But in saying that, stay tuned and watch this video to the very end, because you may be surprised. ePacket isn't a service which is across the board very good or across the board terrible. There are lots of different options when it comes to ePacket. So for example, sending from one city may have many more advantages in comparison to another city using the same service. So in this video we're going to be looking at not just the speed and efficiency or lack of efficiency of ePacket, but we're going to be looking at everything as a whole. And deep dive and look into detail of the pros and cons of ePacket. Be that, sending to the customers if they didn't collect, what the process is when it gets returned. Does it get returned? Where does it get returned to? How long does it take? And we're going to, similar to my Yunexpress teardown, which I'll include somewhere on the screen, you would come to know that it's not just a very quick review of a service. We look at every single aspect. So stay tuned and hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised. Once again, we'll be following this format as we did with the Yunexpress teardown video. If you haven't seen that, I'll provide a link here that you can watch in your own time. I've removed a couple of points as they aren't relevant with ePacket. So number one, brief background and history of ePacket. Then we'll be going on to performance and walkthrough, advantages, disadvantages, and finally the verdict. So let's start with the history, brief background and history of ePacket. China Post have many different services available, just like Yunexpress and other carrier companies, but we won't be reviewing those today. We're just going to be reviewing ePacket on its own. So ePacket is a China Post service which was launched in 2011 as a solution to e-commerce parcels from Hong Kong, China to the US, but it quickly expanded to a total of 44 countries worldwide. ePacket is an agreement made between China Post and the National Postal Service in a particular country. For example, in the US it will be USPS, in the UK it will be Royal Mail, Australia AU Post, you get the point. Unlike special lines such as Yunexpress, there are no privately owned companies involved here. ePacket was set up to offer an efficient, reliable and cost-effective end-to-end trackable service for e-commerce sales. Prior to this, there were only services you could use which were extremely slow or very expensive. So performance, ePacket's biggest downfall is its inconsistency. There are too many variables involved which negatively impact the transit time. Believe it or not, we actually used to use ePacket exclusively years ago. No special lines or expedited services, it was purely just ePacket. We stopped using ePacket almost 2 years ago now, simply because of these inconsistencies. You can have a look at these screenshots of the kind of transit times we regularly saw. These aren't cherry picked, they are just random tracking numbers that we screenshotted quite a while ago. Back then it wasn't uncommon to see these transit times, as I said, door to door from China to a number of EU destinations, averaged 5 days, and then to the US 7 to 8 days. It's almost possible to give a general time frame for delivery for the simple fact that ePacket isn't as good as it used to be. So it's pointless discussing what was. Let's have a look at some recent data. So looking at this 17 track screenshot, I just pasted 40 random tracking numbers in from March, dispatched March and delivered in April. Although this isn't 100% fair analysis, because this also includes remote regions and military addresses, which do take longer than normal, and I'll get into that a little later. But if you just at first glance, you can see that this item here took 9 days to deliver, and in the most extreme case on this batch, I believe there's one, so 43 days. So there's a huge variance, and both, I believe, this is to Florida. I don't believe Florida is or it could actually be a remote region. Maybe that's probably why it took so long. But in any case, there's a big variance in transit time. So Illinois, that isn't a remote region. So from 9 days to 37 days, you can clearly see the inconsistency issue. I won't go too much into this. We'll crack on, and I'll come back to this if need be. So let's talk about the advantages of ePacket. I don't want to turn this into a slating of ePacket. I just want to provide an unbiased video, so you guys can decide for yourself if it's still a service that is good for you. So the first advantage is the serviceable range. There are a total of about 44 countries you can send to via ePacket, although please note, not all of these countries can be sent from mainland China, and some can only go via Hong Kong ePacket or other departure ports within China, but the majority can be sent via most China Post hubs, of which you can see on the screen. Most of these countries you guys probably have sold to in the past or currently selling to. So chances are ePacket can send to the country that you're currently advertising to, or get sales from rather. One of the other biggest advantages to ePacket is the fixed cost. Shipping rates very rarely change, and although it's not the cheapest of services when comparing to other special lines, you're never charged by volume. As long as the parcel dimensions are within the allowed measurements, your parcels won't get pulled aside and you won't be requested to pay the difference. To explain further on volume, you're charged by the size of the parcel, not the weight. So if it's a big bulky item, when you're sending via special lines, the shipping carrier would disregard the weight. So if it weighed half a kilogram, but the parcel was pretty large, they would calculate the weight based on the size, and if it came to something like 2 kilogram, that's actually what you'll be paying, not 500 grams, half a kilogram. So that's a really big advantage to ePacket, and if you are sending bulky or oversized products, you can save a lot if you're sending via ePacket. So another advantage to ePacket is the low chance of prohibited parcels or prohibited products not being detected. Before I go further, let's quickly go over prohibited goods. So that's products such as food, knives, liquids, powders, raw wood or products containing wood, dangerous goods such as lighters, flammable and explosive products, laser pointers, helmets and other such products. As default, you can't send such products with any service, not just ePacket. Whether you're sending Yanwen, 4PX, Yunexpress, whatever, they're prohibited for a reason. Sometimes you can try your luck and they will actually go through via ePacket. Other times they'll get pulled up. Generally speaking though, security checks and scans are not as thorough as special lines, so parcels usually go through undetected. But I mean, in saying this, it's not ideal if you're scaling. You don't really want to be putting it down to luck, because if they do get pulled up, it's a big headache. I'm not sure if it's worth it. But just wanted to mention that because some e-commerce sellers do heavily rely on ePacket for sending their goods, whether it's a power bank or a liquid item or whatever. This is particularly true when an experienced high volume agent is sending these prohibited goods. For example, if they're sending 10,000 normal parcels a day, they would add around 5% parcels to minimize the likelihood of detection. It's quite a lot of these agents do that. Not only because some of them have an AliExpress store and they naturally sell, or they started selling prohibited goods from the very beginning, and they've had to kind of adjust and start selling other products, and they've probably got to the point where they've had to make their store into like a general store with goods that they can actually send, but they've minimized the volume of their main product, which was a prohibited goods item. So in saying this, there are actual, what you could say, special ePacket lines. ePacket parcels sent from Fuljo port, for example, can actually send battery products. It's not down to chance. They can actually clear them. Zhengzhou can send very small volumes of liquids. That is more down to chance in a way, but when we previously used to use them, I don't think we ever had any pulled up, any liquids. Okay, anyway, with prohibited goods aside, let's go into the next one, the next advantage. ePacket is an end-to-end trackable service in most cases. The tracking number remains the same. This means if your customer is contacting USPS for an update, they can give them the same tracking number, which will be detected on their system, as it also acts as the last mile tracking number. ePacket can be tracked on the National Postal Service websites such as royalmail.com, USPS.com, laposte.com, depending on the country you're sending to. Another advantage is the ability to send to remote destinations. So I mentioned this briefly before on the 17 track. Remote destinations are areas such as Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Alaska, and also can send to PO boxes and military addresses. Special lines cannot, Yunexpress, for example, they cannot send to these addresses, so that's an advantage of quite a big advantage of ePacket. In saying this, you can also use, I believe, Sanyo, who generally speaking offer a quicker and more reliable service than ePacket, although it's a bit more expensive than ePacket. So there's a trade-off there. So either use ePacket or something like Sanyo for these particular areas, PO box, military or remote regions. You have to decide if you want speed over cost. So let's move on to disadvantages. Already mentioned, the biggest is the speed and consistency. Because ePacket parcels are sent on normal passenger flights in the cargo hold, it is easily affected by economic and political climates. COVID was a perfect example. When it first kicked off, tourism pretty much died. It was non-existent for most countries. So almost all flights were cancelled. As a result, there was a huge backlog of parcels queuing to go on flights. Again, using a special line as a comparison, ePacket can heavily suffer from delays within China. This largely depends on which city or even town you are sending from. ePacket can be sent from almost anywhere in China, but can vary a massive deal in speed. In some cases, it could take weeks before it even arrives in the main sorting hub for international dispatch. And the reason why our ePacket was so good back in the days was because our parcels were driven straight to Zhengzhou International Airport, and from being collected, it was only like 1 hour away. There was no transferring to different towns or cities. It literally just went from Zhengzhou International Airport directly to the destination country. No domestic transfers within China. I mean, in extreme cases, other areas. So if you're sending from a kind of rural area in China, it would transfer up to like 8 times via land within China before being loaded onto a flight. And even then, there's a possibility it could have been routed domestically again to another international airport within China to finally be loaded on a flight. So you can see how and why ePacket transit times vary so much. There's a max weight limit per parcel, so that is 2 kilograms. It cannot exceed that. If it exceeds that, you have to split up the parcel. So if it's a 4 kilogram order, you would have to send two separate 2 kilogram parcels. The exception is Israel. I believe it's Israel and the UK are 5 kg limitation. Also the size. The maximum size of a single parcel cannot be longer than 60 centimeters on one side and no more than 90 centimeters in total when adding the length plus the width plus the height. ePacket, another issue a lot of you, I wouldn't say you, it's more of your customers who are purchasing, when it's not a huge volume, it's quite rare actually, that some of your customers will cancel the order or want a refund when they know you're sending from China. So with ePacket, you don't have a choice because the tracking shows it's coming from China, as you can see from the screenshots of 17 Track. It's automatically got the city in China and it's got Chinese writing. There are really great apps which can mask this, so you can hide all of the China side. So the next update would show it's in the United States. There's excellent apps such as tryrush.io. I'll provide a link to the video that I made if you want to go and review that. But otherwise, that only helps to a certain point because the postage label, the actual ePacket postage label that's stuck on the parcel, it says China Post on it with Chinese writing. So even if you do mask the tracking before the customer receives it, once they do receive it, it's going to be very clear that it's come from China. So that's one thing you need to take into consideration. With special lines, there is no Chinese on the postage label, so you can actually get away with, and if you use tryrush.io, you'll be able to make it look as though it's coming from the States. Although it's obviously not going to be as quick, 2 to 5 day domestic shipping in the US, it's still going to look as though it's come from the US or whichever country you're sending to. Next one is the returns. So when or if a delivery fails, an ePacket parcel, it's actually returned to the sender in China. So if we were sending it, Honest FulPhilment was sending it from China, it would be returned to us to the sender address. This usually takes forever, and 8 times out of 10 they never turn up anyway. So it's best to count them as lost if that happens, and if they do end up eventually turning up, that's considered a bonus. In comparison to special lines, not all special lines, but some special lines such as Yunexpress, they are automatically returned to a warehouse in that country. So in the US, for example, Yunexpress parcel sent to the customer, for some reason it's been returned, that would go back to Yunexpress's US warehouse, and you've got like 2-week time frame to redeliver at an additional cost. You don't have that option with ePacket. So overall, ePacket offers pretty bad value. At the time of speaking, most special line services are actually cheaper or very similarly priced to ePacket. So it begs the question, if it's more expensive, slower, not as reliable overall, why is it still used? I mean, why would you have the need to use ePacket? So let's go to the verdict. If the majority of your orders are to a country that performs well with ePacket, let's say for example Japan being one of them. Japan is actually pretty efficient, pretty quick. It's very cheap to send via ePacket, and it's very consistent. So if you only send to Japan, it's kind of a no-brainer, because it's the most cost-effective way to send, and you'll be expecting something like an average of 7 to 8 day transit time. But there aren't many countries where ePacket is as efficient and as cost-effective. So let's have a quick look at what I mean by this. So looking at this document, this is how much ePacket costs. I've sorted it from the cheapest to the most expensive. Cheapest per kg, not per registration fee. So if you're sending heavier items on the heavier side, it's going to be very cost effective sending to these countries. Probably up to about here. You'll see 3 United Kingdoms. You can kind of ignore. You can ignore. These are for. So you can see the cost is higher. The fixed fee is higher here. That's if you're sending above 2 kilograms. So if you're sending above 2 kilograms, the registration fee increases. If you're sending below 2 kilograms, the registration fee decreases, but the cost per kg. So it kind of works itself out. It's pretty much the same across the board. But anyway, if you were sending to any of these countries heavier products, even if they're not that heavy, you're still going to be saving a decent amount, not taking the registration fee into consideration. This registration fee is what you have to pay regardless. So if you're sending like an empty parcel, you still have to pay this fee. Then you pay on top per kilogram. So for example, if you're sending a 1 kilogram parcel, you would pay to Korea, you would pay $3.08 plus $6.16. If you're sending a half a kilogram item, you'll be paying $3.08 plus $3.08 $3.08 because it's half of a kilogram. So these countries here, cost-wise, it makes sense sending via ePacket, but you also have to take into consideration and have a look at special line services. So Yunexpress, for example, or even UBI, they have services to Singapore, Malaysia, and they are also very competitively priced. I don't think there's much of a difference, to be honest. But this is where you have to kind of delve into it a little further, because if you are sending via ePacket and you're sending from a rural area, or the agent you're using is sending from an area that's really far away from an international airport, then you're going to lose that advantage of quick transit time. So these orders, for example, you can see, I believe these are actually Yanmen ePackets. So it's actually goes via Yanmen's account, but they are located in Zhengzhou City, which is, as I said, about an hour away from us, and it goes directly to this international airport. It doesn't go to you know, a different city in China and then transfer by rail or road or air to a different area. So what you would find sometimes is that with ePacket, depending on the destination and depending on which you know, what the collection point is and who's actually collecting your parcels, which China Post collection point, it could go from one city to another city to another city, then to Shanghai, then to Beijing, to finally be loaded on a flight and departed. So that's something else you need to also bear in mind. If you can't get it sent directly to an international airport, then it defeats the object altogether, defeats the purpose. So we'll just quickly finish off this verdict because I've dragged it on a little bit. There's probably about 3 countries that are considered reliable and consistent using ePacket. As I said, Japan's one of them. UK used to be. I'm not actually sure if that still is the case. And the other one is Netherlands. But there's the disadvantage to Netherlands is that it doesn't have end-to-end tracking. So it does have end-to-end tracking when you're using something like 17 Track, but you can't track it on PostNL's website. It's not registered, and that's the downside. But otherwise, it is quite efficient. So you have to evaluate your options on the market. You have to compare, you know, Yunexpress, UBI, 4PX, Yanmen, see which countries you're selling to, how heavy your product is. There's so many different dynamics to this that it's not as easy as just saying yes, you know, you can use ePacket, or no, you shouldn't use ePacket. But overall, it's quite safe to say, as a general kind of e-commerce store owner or dropshipper, for somebody who's sending to multiple locations and sending multiple products, it's pretty fair to say ePacket shouldn't be used, simply because of the inconsistencies, and pricing wise it's pretty much the same as or even more expensive than special lines. So hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Apologies for the delay in launching this video. I think it's been about a month since my last video. Been pretty busy with lots of different stuff on the back end, including developing our own software. So hopefully I'm going to be releasing videos more frequently, and definitely not a month in between. I'm going to try and aim for one a week. So thank you very much for watching.